So, Half-Life 2 RTX is out, and about time too, or at least the demo is out, after much teasing, edging even. But not everyone is happy with what they've seen. Albeit a lot of people's judgment really comes more from the gameplay trailer than anything else. This mod aims to basically bring the magic of RTX to Half-Life 2, a game that's already fantastic, and if anything, is mainly only lacking in the visual department from a modern perspective. What's not to love? Apologies for the sunglasses, by the way. I'm supposed to look like this thing, but my glasses were destroyed in a controlled explosion. I'm just as disappointed as you. I'm sure you remember Portal RTX and what that achieved. Wow, shiny. But there is something stirring in the Half-Life community right now. But how can that be? I mean, Portal RTX seemed decent. That leaned a bit too much, I think, into the Portal 2 style, and people thought this kind of destroyed the special vibe that only Portal 1 has, something I've made a video about that I think you'd enjoy if you're a Portal fan. Unlike the dazzling Portal RTX remake, which was made by Nvidia Lightspeed Studios as more of a tech demo, the people behind this, Oberfold Studios, is basically a super team of Half-Life fans and artists who have been involved with some really cool stuff in the space. Think Falcons, but instead of Nico and Tesses, you've got the people behind Half-Life 2 VR, and the team behind Raising the Bar Redux, a mod that attempts to recreate Half-Life 2's beta. But unlike Falcons, they were not bought by Saudi Arabia, and are doing this for pure passion. And especially, I want to shout out the people that did Raising the Bar. They popped in during one of my streams, during a strange helicopter sequence, and they were really friendly. They really lightened the mood and made my day. So thanks a lot, guys. So if you haven't seen all the buzz over the last day or so, excitement for Half-Life 2 RTX was immense. I mean, we were seeing some really impressive stuff ages ago. So surely, I mean, the demo's out. It's a slam dunk, right? An amazing game built by real fans, rather than graphics nerds at Nvidia. I hate Nvidia. I've seen some mixed opinions from people all over the internet, and really it just comes down to 2 points. 1, game run bad. 2, game misses point. And then I started thinking a lot about point 2, and the more I thought about it, the more I wanted to discuss with you guys, so here we are. And since I've got a reasonably good PC, I decided to jump in myself to get a real look at it. Now, the Half-Life fanbase is, in my opinion, made great by, among other things, its enduring passion for a series that just refuses to give us content when we want it. I've been actively around in the community for probably a decade at this point. I've learned a ton and had a lot of fun. And sometimes that passion can lead people to be very protective of the IP, which is at least 30% of the issue we had with Hunt Down the Freeman. Although that's a complete dumpster fire all on its own, regardless of how anyone feels about Valve letting them use the IP. All this to say, I'm not just here to dunk on people that have different opinions from me on this subject. And if you haven't played it, maybe I'll help you decide Half-Life 2 RTX is worth whatever horrific number of gigabytes it's gonna need to take up on your computer when it's finally done. The demo is already massive, though not as big as everyone thought. But is better really better? The other day I made the mortal mistake of opening Reddit. Now don't get me wrong, I think most social media sucks, but only on Reddit will your eyes and mind assaulted by such long-form, meaningless discussion about your favourite things. Well, unless you're interested in something like Glove Island or Dream SMP. Plenty of discussions about these things everywhere, actually. But no, I receive psychic damage looking at some people's takes on this. And no, this doesn't lead to some sort of old man yells at cloud bit, where I show you an annoying social media post, whine about it for a bit, and then ask for your money and claim to be a comedic genius. That being said, this annoying social media post floored me. It seemed one side of people were genuinely bewildered that their 2070 couldn't run this at 60 FPS. And the rest of us were kind of just like, what do you mean? Thankfully, since then, sanity has prevailed. And, well, I'm showing my hand a little early, aren't I? Basically, this is the substance of the game run bad point I was talking about. The title of this post claims that the RTX 50 series cards, which are, to be fair, very powerful cards, can only run this game at 20 FPS with RTX on. That, the game is almost as old as the poster, so this must be really bad. Now, I want to firstly make it clear that I mean absolutely no ill will towards this poster. I would buy him a beer, and I mean that. If you're here, get in touch. I will literally hook you up with a beer. It's just not that deep to me. But you are at least 20 years old. There is no way in hell you think this is the same criticism as someone, say, being mad about frame drops in Cyberpunk, a game made with RTX in mind. Come on, don't play with me. Don't play with me. Not only does this mod use 8K textures and stuff, which some people argue are unnecessary, I say, maybe. But on the subject of cyberpunk, this is using path tracing, more intensive form of light tracing, that I have an example of here. See this pic of Misty? Well, this isn't the best example in the world, but it probably got your attention. And there's a stark difference here. Essentially, you're complaining that your Citroen Zara Picasso can't outrun whatever new Citroen EV they've made. Oh look, there it is now. Oh, look at him go. For my American viewers out there, the Citroen Zara Picasso is a car that's known for being very ugly, and also belongs to renowned British hardman Ronnie Pickering. Now, I don't think explaining how path tracing is achieved is important to this video, and I know you guys are smart, so I've linked a source below so you can do your research. I have a responsibility on this channel to not accidentally mislead you about stuff that I don't 100% understand. Just know that path tracing is more intensive, and there are 8K textures. This is not at all the same thing as a 20-year-old game. All in all, the software would be doing a super important job on top of the brute force of the graphics card. Oh, and the game is running there in native 4K, which the guy just didn't mention, meaning that if you chose not to play native 4K and messed around with DLSS, its various settings, I imagine you get a pretty desirable frame rate with a card like that, no? I mean, I doubled my frame rate using DLSS, and then some. It's not perfect, but it's magic. And I know there's a camp of people out there who just will never use DLSS, they don't like the idea at all, and all the power to you. That's a preference, that's okay. I've heard some valid reasons, but I know most people also don't really care. They just want higher frame rate. But this guy and some others like him saw a game with 8K textures, path tracing, running at native 4K, that's 8, and thought, wow, this is terrible news for everyone. I mean, this game is 20 years old, bro. It's over. It's over. An uncritical reading of this would leave the majority of PC gamers right now clicking away from Half-Life 2 RTX and never giving it a fair shake because they thought, well, there's no chance in hell that I could run it. They might miss their shot at experiencing the game in a new light. Literally. But it's just not true. But because I do love this community and I don't want to just come in and take the piss, as we say here in England, I decided to jump in myself. I have an RTX 4060 because I mainly play old games, Counter-Strike, and also just use the device as a workstation for my graphics work and my video editing. And yes, this is a laptop. So I have 32 gigabytes of laptop RAM and an i7 13650HX laptop CPU. Now, this is by no means a spaceship, but it's great for me. And I in fact think that for the price I paid, though I got a hefty discount, you could probably get a pretty crazy desktop, especially if you had the common sense to go with better brands. Oh, go on guys, don't hold back. Try to mock me for getting a low VRAM graphics card and an Intel CPU in the year of our Lord, 2025. I live for the engagement. But trust me, it far beats my old laptop, where I had to take the battery out because it kept crackling. I didn't want to die in a horrific chemical explosion. If you're watching this video, I lived. Now, as you can see, I was able to achieve a more or less stable 25 to 30 FPS at 1080p in performance mode with transform mode on, which looks amazing. And this was mostly wonderful. Now, I imagine my laptop is probably somewhere at the halfway point, maybe slightly over that, when it comes to performance expectations. But while some people are disappointed at this frame rate, to me it's a miracle. The first time I experienced Half-Life 2 was at a worse frame rate on the original Xbox. RTX off, by the way. And it looks exactly how I remembered. So I mean, performance-wise, no, it's not a thrill. There's plenty of work still to be done on optimization and stuff. It's only a demo after all, and 30 FPS with this kind of tech is mind-blowing to me. Would I play the whole game like this? Well, no. And there are points where I felt it slowed down for no discernible reason, but I don't know all the variables at play here, so it's hard for me to judge. There are also definitely plenty of artifacts and bugs, which I will get into detail on later, and you can decide if that's right for you or not. But not for a second would I say this is unplayable, or so bad that I wouldn't download the free demo. At least, not so far. Now, what immediately jumped out to me when I looked at the reviews after my experience was that people had all kinds of different setups. I saw people having varying degrees of success with this game with the same GPUs, which leads me to believe there could be some bottlenecking going on. Sort your CPU out. It's important. Shockingly, this little 4060 for the laptop was outperforming some people's 4070 Supers. This should not be happening. And to be honest, you also can't completely rule out human error. For example, I tried to play the game with Chrome open. And I think it's quite easy to leave some other things open if you don't close them in Task Manager first. And yeah, this is quite a demanding game. There's no two ways about it. You have to prepare. And it's especially puzzling considering every game that looks half as good as this already sucks with its optimization anyway. What I've learned in the past few years is that optimization is like tax. No one really pays their taxes. It's all just a big joke. I paid my taxes once, but I was being ironic. The biggest actual visual criticism I've seen from people is just the idea that it misses the point. And you definitely won't want to miss my multiple hours long Half-Life 2 review, / theory video, / analysis, including a custom album of Half-Life 2 music that I made myself, so subscribe and keep up. The biggest relief for me, and proof that we are still living in some sort of base reality, is that most of the criticism I've seen about the looks of the game are not saying it looks bad, they're saying it's not a worthy companion to Half-Life 2. It doesn't capture the Half-Life 2 experience. There's also concerns about quality and all of that stuff, which is perfectly valid in my opinion. And it's not an official product, so sometimes the team is just going to have a slightly different vision, or they felt or experienced the same things in just a different way, which influenced them to design in a certain way that might not be what you would have done. And at the end of the day, there's no argument to be had there. It's all just preference. I'm sure you leaners, Jesus Christ. I've seen the pretty funny criticisms of Ravenholm just floating around, calling it everybody loves Ravenholm, everybody goes to Ravenholm, etc. And this is because some people feel that the map has been transformed from an early aughts horror classic to the standard modern British housing estate. Borderline inviting, but still full of people off their faces on spice. Ravenholm, if you will. With Half-Life 2 RTX's new lighting, some are saying that the map is too bright, and this takes away some of the tension and the trademark horror. And I admit I've seen one or two places where I thought, you know what, maybe they're onto something. This did kind of look better when it was really, really dark. And if you stick with me, I'll be really honest, I have a list of things that I didn't like as well. But of course, I also have a list of things I loved, so stay tuned. I really feel most of this comes down to the very undefined, squishy subject of art direction versus fidelity. Do you want realism or do you want that look? Is better. I've seen some screenshots that I can see a genuine argument for, but that I just don't know would be easy to justify changing to a team whose goal it is to create a tech demo about the presence of light and a more realistic, natural way of representing its movement. Now, Valve is no stranger to subtly nudging things to give up a little bit of realism to create the impression of more realism, which might sound paradoxical, but it isn't, or just to improve the player experience. One example would be the ragdolls and how Valve's low-key pulling those ragdolls a little bit sometimes, and that's okay. So if I'm the mod maker here, I'm thinking, well, there is precedent to bending the rules a little bit if it means a nicer overall product. Should we? Who's right? Who's wrong? It's Half-Life 2 RTX. It's not Half-Life 2 2. Its job is to be Half-Life 2 RTX. So does that mean that it should be more realistic? Or are the people who want to stay super faithful to Half-Life 2 correct? The answer is there is no answer. God help us all. My guess is that they just kind of leave it and maybe turn down the intensity in places, if that's even a thing. This makes me think of the Ship of Theseus experiment. If you change all of Half-Life 2's looks and do it 20 years on in a different time, is it still Half-Life 2? Nobody cares. Why did everyone just suddenly start talking about the Ship of Theseus in their videos recently? I feel like something's been downloaded to humanity. Anyway, as promised, a quick list of things I didn't like. Some of what I'm assuming to be the ambient occlusion, the darkness around objects that makes them look set in the world, could give some stuff an almost Borderlands-like look. I didn't really notice this that often. The biggest example for me was this guy who, he's half a man. Look at that outline, looks a bit silly. Silly outline. The monitors in Nova Prospect see every guard doing a really good impression of my dad and disappearing and reappearing wherever it's convenient, but always kind of abstract. The fire, I think, matches the vibe of the game, but it doesn't act super fiery, and I think the effects themselves look kind of lackluster and flat in such a beautifully rendered world like this. Now, I've never lit anything bigger than a campfire, so you're gonna have to tell me, does fire just appear here like this and then disappear in steps like 1, 2, 3? Is that a thing? I'm genuinely asking. The smoke, I admit, it can be a bit much, and I've seen some really gnarly screenshots, especially indoors, where the gun smoke is just a complete obstruction. But this part here is the closest in the whole experience I feel I can get to saying something is flatly just bad design. When the smoke obscures Grigory here, it kind of defeats the entire purpose of this area. Now, this isn't a real concern, most of us have already played, but I think it's a majorly establishing moment. Just make it a bit darker in this place, or rather make it less thick. I definitely think this should be fixed. I'm not sure if the fire needs a complete overhaul or if it's just my settings, but I would definitely be looking at improving the fire. I'm not sure what I would call these, but I know someone in the comments might. Now, I'm no expert, but that shouldn't be there. There are a few more visual bugs that have likely been discussed to death already and aren't that interesting. And I assume with what this team has done, there's no possible way that they're satisfied that this is like anywhere near done, right? So yeah, there's a decent amount of issues here, and I think it would definitely gatekeep my enjoyment of this were this a full product, and especially if it was asking for my money. But I guess it doesn't bother me too much right now, because I don't expect to have to play through the whole game for a while until the mod is fully finished and reasonably polished. If this were a full release, then I'd be a bit meaner, but since I've spent most of my actual existence on this earth unironically waiting for the release of Half-Life 3, it just doesn't seem that bad to wait a little longer for this to be finished. Though this does make it harder for me to run an 8-hour stream of Half-Life 2 RTX gameplay with exaggerated reactions, which would no doubt really boost my channel. So I guess you guys are just gonna have to subscribe for now and leave a comment telling me what you think of Half-Life 2 RTX. So yeah, overall, I'm not too pressed about its current shortcomings. I think the modders deserve a little bit of leeway here. This demo is probably an opportunity for them to learn a ton about how they can fix and improve things. And it's not a car crash. Most of the time, it's great. Moving on, there was a lot of stuff I liked too. A big thing for me was that at points, I genuinely forgot to study this so I could make a video about it, and I just kind of got lost in it in a way that I haven't felt in Half-Life 2 in probably more than 10 years. I just enjoyed it, and it really felt like it just worked. Before we move on to the list of things I absolutely loved, I'll mention a couple of things that I think missed the point, because bugs, they're bugs. This is something deeper. The poison zombie model just doesn't quite sit right with me. I think it's the clothes, I'm not sure. Apart from the back, which is just awful in the best way. Great job. I'm sure I'd still rather be one of these than a fast zombie, which I didn't feel in Half-Life 2. Something about Half-Life 2's version just looks more painful to me still, which I think is a big part of this monster's character. Maybe it's the coloration. Also, sometimes the standard zombies just look uncanny. Now, in my opinion, they always did. And no, I'm not just talking about, oh, isn't it so uncanny that this guy's a freaking headhumper on his head? No, it's something more than that. But this uncanniness feels like it's coming less from the weird arrangement of its various gory colors and more from just how they fit into the world. Again, this could be back to the lights being a bit too light. Someone said they look a little cardboardish, and I guess that's what I would go with. Am I the only one? Well, I know I'm not alone here, and not just because I read other people's comments. Dr. Breen's private reserve can just feels wrong somehow, and I don't know why. I know they'll get around to updating the posters and the other decals, but I want them now. I know they needed to update this corpse model, but it's actually less scary now that it's no longer using a real face. So please use a real face going forward, thank you. Just kidding, don't. Occasionally though, something is different that I really like. For example, the way the headcrab fixes to the zombie's head and its general size and everything, it looks so off. But I like it. I think its presence and the way the light bounces off the flesh of the headcrab really just underlines how unnatural and weird the concept of a Half-Life zombie is. I guess this is just a natural consequence of enhanced realism in general, but it feels a lot more like practical effects than CGI. Which is probably totally redundant for me to say. Like, I see it less as its own entity, the Half-Life zombie, and more like a poor guy with a gross alien sack on his head. Bravo, seriously. The fast zombie model is so cool as well. It seems they've given the chest-mouth thing the attention it deserves, whereas in Half-Life 2 it was kind of covered with like a veil of barely clinging on muscle. It also has a dead-looking eyeball still in its skull, which I also like because, now, I don't know if this is a me problem, but once something looks enough like a skeleton, it just stops scaring me and sometimes becomes funny. I can kind of separate it as like, oh, that's a skeleton, and then I start thinking of like Minecraft and whatever. But this small detail reminds me that this is still a person, just obviously absolutely ramshackled like the Sainsbury's reduced section a minute after 6 o'clock. This humanity and this imperfection is the same reason I like the socks on the unreleased beta model. Do not clip that. And I appreciate stuff like this because, well, there's no way every fast zombie ever to exist would have both of its eyeballs missing. The crab isn't a genius, it's latching onto new prey that it's never come across before. It always felt like the way the fast head crab like nailed racing style weight reduction and knew exactly what to take out and what to leave in on a human. Like this guy's about to enter 24 hours Le Mans. Actually, I would pay good money to see a fast zombie do 24 hours of endurance racing. But at the end of the day, I guess you could just say there's no way that every zombie to exist would have just one eyeball either. Touché. There's an obvious but totally unnecessary fix here. I'll leave it to you. Where the fuck did I just tip my hat? Milady. Anyway, I think the recipe for making Half-Life zombies the best they can be is to emphasize the humanity of the host and emphasize the alienness of the headcrab. This is something I think Valve really turned up to 11 with Alex, and they knew exactly what they were doing. So to see that these have identified that alone tells me that I'm pretty sure they've understood the assignment here. I also really felt this realism when looking at some of the bodies. That everything is designed with so much detail that I can perfectly imagine what it would feel like to scratch it or to poke it. I was really impressed with some parts of the Combine uniform, and I felt I could imagine exactly what it would feel like. On the other hand, I cringed at the headcrabs because, oh my god, I know now. I know. And when I was looking at some of the human bodies, I really felt like I just shouldn't be seeing this. So, same as Alex then? Well, sure, but different. I like. But if you ask me, it's hard for me to have a take on whether the game hits the mark or not, because it's not really about sides in the first place, just preference. Some people hated Half-Life's pivot from shiny sci-fi to hard, concrete, cold realism. And those people are wrong, but really, what would you say to someone to change their mind on that? Would you argue with pixel count? Would you appeal to the process and how advanced it was? Some things are just an uphill battle, and nobody wins in the end. I just don't think anything here is bad enough, despite its problems, for me to really care to be angry. But if I could say something to the devs, it would just be, fix the broken things, experiment with different solutions with fire, know when to listen and when not to listen, and just keep going. I have no problem at all with the vast majority of what I experienced playing this, and my hope is that the things that have disappointed me will disappear reasonably soon. The few times something really just rubbed me the wrong way, it's been really quite minor, and I'm reminded that these guys take feedback. I like how Half-Life looks with RTX, and so I'm always probably going to lean towards I prefer the realism over trying to reinvent Half-Life 2, which is actually at odds with how I usually feel. But that's because this is all about showcasing RTX. I got what I was expecting. This isn't an official product. There are no stakes. It doesn't have to hit me on some profound level. It's achieving its purpose. But is better better? Always no. In a project where the job is to be Half-Life 2 but visually just more, I have to say yes. And though the Steam reviews remain mixed, please give it a go if your computer can handle it. And please ignore the fact that you might have already been able to download the game in the time it took you to watch this video. It's an event, it's worth seeing if nothing else. I just hope they figure out how to make it run a little better. And as one review on Steam says, I hope Nvidia has something good planned for these fantastic artists. It's got everyone talking about RTX tech again, and unlike before, it's not an official Nvidia project using their team.
Hello and welcome back to the spray paint review, where we will be seeing if this spray paint passes the taste test. And oh my god, you poor thing, are you homeless? Aww. Hello, do you need help?
How am I supposed to run this 20-year-old game on my 30-year-old computer? Why would they add RTX to the game? It will just make it run slower. It's not enough. Oh. It's not enough.
Oh god.
It's not enough!
Oh my god.
It's not enough! It's not enough!